Oh, sorry, guys.
Oh.
Hey.
Hey.
Oh, we're on.
Well, we're on. Cheers.
Matt Woods.
Matt
Woods.
Matt Woods.
So we're on for, believe it or not, our 11th episode, our 11th month, because we do it only once a month because we're too cheap to do it more than once a month. But this costs money.
No,
the big production here, the lights, the cameras. Come on, that's the way it goes. Anyway, we got the usual crowd here today. All right, so let's say hi. Let's start with to my left.
Hello, everyone. Alan, I'm super glad to be here. I'm glad we hit 11. This is going to be another fun episode. I can't wait.
It's going to be great. Canada.
Hi. Wayne, Squirrel Madness Comics, or now on Instagram, Squirrel Madness Reborn, because I lost my account. Sort of working on it. Really looking forward to number 11.
And the amazing couple.
Oh, we're going to do there. Okay.
Master and Madam Blaster. Give me some love, Madam. Hey, everybody.
Hi.
And finally, the one, the only, the amazing Mr. Matt Woods. Matt?
Joe, I was trying to get your attention, okay? You're saying this is our 11th episode.
I think it is.
I have 10 fingers. I have 10 fingers. I can't keep track of where we are right now. I'm going to start having to take my shoes off, okay? Now,
please don't do that during the show. Rumor. That's all I ask. Please. All right.
There is a crazy rumor that there's a naked version of Doug Bratton out there in the comic book world, and hopefully he can lend me a finger. I don't know if that's true or not. But
we'll have to wait and see. I mean, after the Sandman was naked for 100 years on the show, I think Doug likes to emulate him a little bit, but we'll get into that now. Let's say hello to people that have joined us here. So what do we have? We have there's Bulldog. How you doing? He's saying hello to Chris Biggers. He must be here somewhere. I'm gonna go up a little bit further. Let's see what we got here. Who's this guy? Action figure comedy. Oh another Bratton. Hey, how are you? All right, there's Chris Bigger. All right, let's see. Chris. We said Bulldog. We said hello already to him. The big conversation going on here. Randy Resnake. How you doing, Randy?
Hey.
Randy's here. Phil from Philtastic Comics and Art. He knew that the other New Jersey guy was going to be on, so he had to be here for him, right? Let's see who else we might have here. Let's see. We got Randy. A lot of discussion going on among these peoples here. Brian LCS. Hey, Brian.
Hey, Brian.
We all want to take the opportunity to thank you for all the work that you do for the Comic Book Community Award 2022. And of course, this particular show, the Comic Book Crowd, is a nominee in the 100 to 99 sub, what is it? Special, whatever it is, whatever the category is, collaboration. And down below, Madam and Master Blaster is on the same collaboration. 100 to 99 sub collaboration thing. So all of our friends are going to split the votes between us, and we're not going to win. But that's okay. We're really happy that we got nominated. All right. Plus, Matt Woods was nominated for best unboxing for like the bigger 1,000 to 4,999 subs. And a big surprise for me, Anachronic Comics was nominated for best unboxing. I thought it was because of Bruno, but on your show you mentioned it was because of the espresso mail call. So whatever it is, that's great. So we're just really happy that we got recognized. We're really, really happy about that. So thanks a lot, Brian, for everything you do. All right, did we miss anybody? Anybody else here? Let's see. We got Brian. I think that's it for now. So we have a special guest star here now. Now, we don't have a lot of special guests, mostly because they want to get paid. This guy would do it for free. So we said, why not, right? So we've got a special guest. But before we show that special guest, Bruno, Bruno gets upset sometimes, and you got to be a little bit careful with Bruno because Bruno's Bruno. You know what I mean, right? Hey, So he told me he wanted to be on the show. I told him, Bruno, I don't pay for the expensive version of StreamYard, so we can only have 6 at one time. So he suggested that I kick off somebody, but I wasn't going to do that, So since we only have 6, I told Bruno, well, look, you want to do something for the show, go ahead and do it. And he said, okay, what's this Doug Bratton guy? He writes Isolation and whatever else. He's a Sandman person. He goes to sleep. What does that mean? So I said, look, you want to do something, and introduce him? Maybe why don't you do an introductory type of thing? He said, okay. So let's see what he did. Hold on. And there he is, Doug Bratton. I can't believe it was such a tasteful movie, Bruno. I was really scared. I didn't work out.
Yeah. A true work of art, Bruno.
Well,
That was great.
Bruno told me he was looking for some of your cartoons, that you did, and he was looking for superhero cartoons, and I guess he came up with a few that he found. So, Doug, welcome to the Comic Book Crowd. Actually, we were on once before. You subbed for somebody. I can't remember who it was, but you subbed for somebody.
I did. I think it was Matt. Yeah.
Matt. Yeah, Matt was.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we love having you here, and one of the things that I think is really great is the fact that you're not on Reggie's show. Because we started to think that it was not Regie Collects, but it was Doug Bratton Collects. So that was probably the case. But so the fact that you're on the show, but actually you've been on a lot of different shows talking about isolation and the rest of the stuff. So, people could take a look and see you on a lot of different shows publicizing the comic book. And we're going to be talking about that in the second part of the show. But in the first part of the show, we want to talk about Sandman. And we got you on here. Originally, our thought was, who's the one guy that we know that knows all about Sandman, has read each one of the 75 issues like 150 times each, is definitely going to watch the show like about 25 or 30 times before we get on at the end of the month. And everybody said, hey, Doug Bratton. That'd be Doug Bratton. So we're glad that you're able to join us for this. And let's do a little bit of talking about the Sandman before we get to isolation. Is that
awesome?
Okay with you?
Yeah, and I appreciate the invite. You had me at Sandman, Steve, and congratulations to all of you on the nominees. Really well-deserved nominations. Well-deserved.
Thank you.
Thanks.
That's awesome. All right, am I taking over?
I think you should.
All right. Well, Doug, thanks for coming on. When you think Sandman, you think of Doug Bratton as far as a Gibbon Gang member. I think that's a safe thing to say. And I think we were all unprepared for it, right? I don't know if anybody else on the show besides you read the comic book. So we watched the show without that knowledge. It looks like Matt might have read a couple.
I read
number
9 issues after the show. I read 9 issues of it.
So we wanted to invite you on almost from, I hope it's safe to say, I mean, maybe it's a sad thing to say, but a lot of the comic book community didn't read the Sandman and didn't know it. So to see the content, comic book content come into media and backwards engineer it is how I actually came into comic books with Tim Burton's Batman. How I was exposed to The Crow. I saw the movie first, and then I went to the comic books. The Walking Dead is actually, I saw the show first, and then I went to the comic book. And frankly, with the Walking Dead example and The Crow, I really enjoyed the comic book, and they're different. So for me, first I'll ask you like some softball questions. Like,
Then they're gonna get
About
tough.
the show, Doug, but then I will relate it to asking you questions from the perspective of not knowing about the comic book and how does it relate to the show. So, what'd you think about the show, Doug?
But an open-ended question.
Yeah, no, I loved it. And I really enjoy meeting and talking to people who haven't read it, because I know it's a very different experience. There are certain things when you've read it that you kind of, you know what's going to happen, but you don't know how they're going to adapt it and change it. So you watch it with different eyes. And for me, being a fan of Neil Gaiman, of the Sandman, and now of the series, I want to see it continue. And the only way that's really going to happen is if it translates well and people who haven't read it enjoy it. You know, if it's just people like me watching it over and over, it's not going to have the legs that it deserves. So I'm thrilled when I meet people who haven't read it, who are introduced to it by the series. And I'll say, you know, comics aren't for everybody. So I know there are some really huge Neil Gaiman fans who've never read the series because it's in comic form. It's a denser series and there's not a tremendous amount of action. So it's not for every comic fan either. But it's still a really amazing story, especially if you get through some of the denser parts of it to the end. It's brilliant storytelling. It's amazing the different threads that Neil Gaiman ties together in the end. So while I would encourage people to give it a try and read it, reading it isn't for everybody, and that's okay. I think if the show has legs, it'll give a lot of people an opportunity to experience a wonderful story in a medium that works for them.
Well, let me declare where I stand. I've seen it all the way through once, and I watched episode 11, which they dropped later. And I'm on round 2 with Stephanie, and I think it's fantastic. I think the singular episodes can stand alone, which is impressive. But the thread is always going through, and how it addresses so many aspects of the human condition while telling a story. Like a lot of very renowned shows deal with something and they might go 1 or 2 levels deep into the human condition. This show touches all kinds of areas, and so I'm a huge fan. I just wanted to say that. Now, Stephanie has a couple questions. Why don't you ask your questions, honey? They're not softball questions, but I have a couple deeper questions, and then I'll pass it on to the other panel.
Doug, what's your favorite episode?
Episode 6, the sound of her wings. I think that's
my favorite episode.
That was a great episode.
I think it's probably everybody. It better get an Emmy or multiple Emmys. It's a tremendous. It's actually more than one episodes of the comic because it has the death story, the day with death, and the Hob Gadling story. And Hob Gadling is probably my favorite character in the entire series. And then Death is right up there. So it was an amazing episode. I thought the bonus episode, though, was a pretty darn close second, the Calliope and Dream of a Thousand Cats. I thought that was fantastic also.
Yeah, but the cat scared me at the end. He's dreaming about eating people. Come on.
Well, they killed you in another world.
Nightmare came in that night then, into my bed, and I'm sitting down there and I felt like somebody was chewing on my foot for a second, I don't like cats now.
What else you got, baby?
That's it. Do you think that and mostly that goes in line with the comics?
The episodes
series?
that they've created, are they like chronologically in line with the comic books, or?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's been a couple of years since I read the series, so I'm going somewhat from memory. It felt very true to the series. They made some what I felt were really, really smart updates and changes that, anything you write 30 years later needs some changes. To me, the most notable one, without spoiling anyone for those who haven't seen the season yet, John D, the character John D, is much more gruesome and nightmarish and intense in the comic. And I feel like they made the character more nuanced, and I felt that worked a lot better for television. So there were some changes like that. I'd like to go back and check. I know Calliope and Dream of a Thousand Cats were the latest issues that they adapted. Like, they used a couple of characters that weren't introduced until later and pulled them in, but those were issues 17 and 18.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's how deep we are into the run.
Yep. And Preludes and Nocturnes and The Dollhouse, which are the first two kind of complete story arcs in the comic book series, were definitely the focus of pretty much the other 10 episodes. So, yeah, I thought they did a phenomenal job. I can't really even remember there's one issue that I know they did not adapt, and they hinted at it in 2 episodes. And my belief is it was done to set up the beginning of season 2, if we're lucky enough to get a season 2. And that was the sorry, go.
Sorry, I got one last question. If you could be any character, which one would you be?
Ooh. Man, I know where the story goes, so I don't want to spoil anything. I mean, Hobgatling is...
You can DM Madam. You can DM her the answer.
Yeah, I don't know if I want to be Hobgatling, and there are reasons for that for a longer conversation another time, but it would be interesting. He's an interesting character. Man, that's tough. That's really tough.
All right. I want to turn it over to everybody else because we want to talk about isolation, but I'm going to say my other 2 questions. And if you can squeeze the answers in as you're talking. Okay. Sam Keith. I am a huge fan of Sam Keith, and he did the art. Some of the art, it looked like it was a team. So I'm curious your thoughts on Sam Keith and his part in the Sandman comic book. And then when you have been talking about Sandman elsewhere, there seems to be concern that it might not get renewed. And I'm wondering if you can shed some light on it. Was it really, I feel like you know the answer to this. Was it really expensive to create? Is it because Netflix is hurting for money? Because it's so good. I haven't heard anybody say they don't like it. So I feel like we don't have anything to worry about it, but if you can shed some light on that, I want to see more episodes.
Are you okay if I hop on that one right now?
Yes.
I feel there will be a season 2, and I hope it's on Netflix because I feel they did a great job. It is bizarre to think about the fact that it has far and away been the #1 show on the planet for 3 weeks in a row, and its numbers are amazing. It's getting critical acclaim. I think the reality is that Netflix has had some financial challenges since cutting out Russia voluntarily. And this might be wishful thinking. I don't think they're trying to make, and I could be totally off the mark. I don't think they're trying to decide whether or not a season 2 is warranted. I think they're trying to decide how much money they have, and do they greenlight a smaller 1-story arc 6-episode season, or do they give them the full do 2 again, 10 to 12 episodes like they did for season 1? The reality is, if they don't do that, to me, that's either short-sighted or it shows really bad budgeting in the first place, because it was an expensive show compared to a lot of shows. But if you put a certain amount of money into a show and it has this level of popularity and it was a bad investment, that's just really poor budgeting. And the short-sighted part of that is, not only can they do this wonderful series for like 5 to 7 seasons easily, there are a number of spin-off shows that they could do as well, including one about death, who I think that show would be quite popular. So I'm biased because I really, really want to see it, but I think it would be foolish for them not to greenlight some level of a season 2.
That sounds rational to me. All right. I heard that Alan has the power to boot you and do things to you, so we should probably go to him next.
No, this is a really cool conversation, because so I last year I read the first probably like 15 or so issues. I didn't really get to the Calliope type of issues quite yet. I guess this is for, like, yeah, I guess anyone could answer this, but for you, Doug, I think of the first episodes, it was kind of interesting how, and you mentioned this, I wish like I brought this up before too, is it was written like in the 80s, right? 80s, like late 80s.
Late
So
80s
a lot
through
of
the
the early 90s, right? So yeah, I remember like reading some of those issues, and then how I think Neil Gaiman was part of doing the, like, kind of with the producing group, trying to like update it to today. Like I know episode 6 was probably your favorite, and yeah, I would say Hob Gadling was a really cool character. But if you were given the option to be able to live for that long, do you think you would be able to live through all like those, like, I think it's for everyone too. Would you, if you were given the possibility to live for 500 years, would you do it? Like, you would be the only person to live 500 plus years.
So I'll answer it and not give a reason why. And my answer is no. And the reason I'm not giving a reason for that is I'm toying with a story idea that's separate from isolation, that kind of explores that. And it is somewhat based on the Hob Gadling, and not that Hob Gadling's in it, but it's kind of based on that relationship in the Sandman. So I'll leave it at that. Okay.
My answer.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I do. I have an answer. I mean, remember what Morpheus said, death is part of living. I mean, from my standpoint, when I took a look at that fellow, how does he pronounce his name? Hob what? Was it again?
Hob Gadling.
Hob Gadling. Yeah. He went through ups and downs, obviously, right? I mean, at one point in time, even when he was down, he said, well, yeah, no, I'm love life still and all this. But the issue for me is, I mean, having lived as long as I have, thank God, and being with my wife now for 41 years, I would have trouble knowing that she wouldn't be around. I would have trouble seeing my children grow up and pass, and potentially grandchildren grow up and pass. Yeah. That would be very troublesome to me. Mm-hmm. I don't know that it would be worth it otherwise. Hey, guys, when I retired, I can't believe now it was 7 years ago. I moved. Some people say I got to keep working. I moved into retirement like smoothly. To me, it was, I'm happy. I don't want to do any of that stuff anymore, or be involved with any stuff anymore. And to think that I'd have to go through a number of careers with a number of either bosses or other people there that could cause, make my life good or miserable. Like once is enough. But for me, it's more about family, and being able to go through that and seeing that, I think would be problematic for me from a mental health standpoint. So I wouldn't be like that fellow Hob.
Yeah, Hob Gadling.
Yeah.
Yep.
For a comic book to inspire us to think about this concept is why the show is so good. I mean,
exactly.
Not worth it, Dave. Not worth it.
I'm with you, Steve. And Alan, what a thoughtful question, because it does make you think about these things. And
it does. Yeah.
Yep.
But the whole story does that. I mean, I'm going to bring up something because I do see that Dave is here, and we talk DC a lot and all of that. And when the Batman came out, for example, people were saying, I need some laughs. I need this. I need that. There's not any laughs in this. I mean, this is a serious work of literature, in my view. And with respect to that, I mean, either you like this type of stuff because it makes you think, and there are some people that don't. They want to, they just want to be entertained, and I understand that because I get into those moods as well. I mean, I'll watch the Harley Quinn cartoon, with all of its 4-letter words and everything like that every now and then because I just need something to let it go.
Yeah.
But my life has always been about, being thoughtful about things. That was my job, basically. I was, as my client said, you're the detail person, and that's what I do. And when I get something like this and I take a look at this, I'm thinking the whole time, but I don't stop that. Then I go back and I say, okay, let me read about it. Let me get more into these type of things. Excuse me, like the whole thing with death, for example, the whole thing with even Galt, who didn't appear in the comic books, I understand. There was actually a combination of two different characters. But what they went through, but Morpheus himself, what he went through, and what we go through from life. I mean, there's so much in there, even the cat thing, which now, scares the hell out of me. But the cat thing, I mean, to me, Calliope was a great standalone, episode. And it brings to life, we might be married or whatever else, but I mean, we all went through, at least I didn't. I think many of us have gone through relationships that didn't work out. And so we can relate to that. And then being able to somehow come to some sort of I don't know what you would call it, not a resolution exactly, but where they kind of finally are able to meet minds and to not quite talk about their son, but kind of be there for each other.
Yep.
To me was a great ending to a relationship that didn't exist. And why did that happen? Because of everything that Morpheus had gone through beforehand. So when I go through these type of things, like Lucifer Morningstar, like why? I mean, that might be this season too, if it's going to be at least part of it. So what's really going through their minds? What's going through the minds of the of some of the other, endless that are there, and that are trying to trick him all the time? Why is that happening? What are they looking for? Is it more than just fun? Is there something else there? So to me, that's what I really loved about this, and why I said, well, I'm going on DC Universe Infinite and seeing whether they have it. And sure enough, they started slowly but surely putting out some of the issues, and I've read through 9 of them so far. My plan is to continue reading through them, and hopefully they put all 75 on eventually, so I'll be able to read through all 75 of the issues because it intrigues me now. The story intrigues me.
Well, I'll tease you all a little bit. The Dollhouse, which was kind of more the second half of season 1, was probably one of my least favorite story arcs. It wasn't bad. It just didn't grip me as well. what is coming next, which involves Nada, Calliope, their son Orpheus, Lucifer. That is probably one of, if not my favorite story arcs in the entire series. And I think is kind of critically considered some of the best. Oh, and it also gets a little bit more into the Hobgadling Sing, where he connects with William Shakespeare, which is important to the entirety. So I am fully expecting that if there is a season 2, it may be better than season 1.
Ooh, that's great to hear.
That's what we wanted to hear.
Matt?
All right. Matt, you got something to say over there?
I'm blown away. Okay, I'm gonna get away from all the morbid talk and extended life stuff. Okay, that's a good conversation, but not for the comic book crowd tonight. Right now, we are gonna ask. First off, I want to say, Doug, you blew my mind here when you said you're working on a new project. Anachronic Comics, one of the best YouTube channels out there, broke the story. Doug Bratton is working on a new issue, maybe comic book, maybe book. I don't know. What is it going to be, Doug? Is it a book? Is it a comic?
I am still so early in figuring out the story. So whether this sees the light of day in the next years, who knows? If all were to go perfectly well, I would love to write it as kind of a one-shot comic, maybe a longer comic or a really short mini series. But I don't know if Reggie's watching this. He's like, "What are you said you weren't going to work on anything else but Isolation."
Well, Joe, Anachronic Comics, great job for putting out that news story, okay? Now, I'm going to get to the real questions, okay? A lot of my followers on Instagram and other people that I just meet random on the street are asking me, I need to ask Doug Bratton the real questions, okay? I'm going to throw you a softball question first, okay? A real underhand slow pitch, okay? It's going to be the Beer Men's Sunday Afternoon League, all right? So, where did you first get interested in the comic book Sandman? Because I don't know. I think you've been on Reggie's channel for like 2 years now, talking about it, writing blogs on his website, long before the show was even announced, I think. So how did you get interested in it to begin with?
I came to it later in life. I probably read the Preludes and Nocturnes for the first time about 5 years ago, maybe. And I think what got, and it might not have even been that long ago. I'm having a hard time remembering. It was definitely pre-COVID. I think the thing that got me into it was I had been out of comics for a long time. Dave was still into reading trades, and he had let me borrow a few trades, most of which weren't my thing, but I loved The Long Halloween by Tim Sale and Jeff Loeb. And I think the thing that it got me thinking about, and then I started reading some of Alan Moore's Swamp Thing.
Great stuff.
And and I started realizing that there was this really unique period in the 1980s, and it was basically DC, so props to DC, where in my opinion, some of, if not all of the greatest comic stories written were produced in this about a decade period. Watchmen, Dark Knight Returns, Alan Moore's Swamp Thing.
Really big ones, yeah.
Yeah, and the thing that I realized was there was one in every top 10 list that I'd ever read that always was in there with those and it was Neil Gaiman's The Sandman, and I'd never read it. And I said, well, geez, if this is up there with those, and those are pretty much mostly the only kind of level of comics that I tend to be really interested in, I should give it a try. And man, am I glad I did.
Mm-hmm.
All right, that might be the only serious question I ask you right now. But now I'm going to ask the real questions, okay? Now, the internet rumor that is going out there is if you go into your bathroom after midnight, light a candle, shut the light off, and turn your back to the mirror and say, Doug Bratton, Doug Bratton, Doug Bratton. And then you turn back around, there's a man covered in blood that's going to reach through the mirror and pull you into it. Is that a true story, Doug?
No, Morpheus appears. Not a bloody
Morpheus appears.
Yeah, Morpheus appears.
Well, I didn't say it was Doug appearing. I just said, is it true? A man appears to pull you into the mirror.
Yeah, Morpheus. That is true.
Okay, so it is true. Now, that sounds like something that somebody who would come through the mirror and try to get you would say. So, I want to know, people in the chat, let us know, is it Doug that comes through the mirror or is it Morpheus? Because we've got to figure out and get to the bottom of this. All right. Now, my next question. Whoa, man.
1 second. I thought he was going to say, does Calliope come through the mirror and give you the ideas for isolation in your book? So I was getting a little scared there. So I'm glad he didn't say that.
That could be another show. All right. Now, in the comic books, I'm going to get to the truth of this. Does Morpheus talk to Lucifer?
Like, do they speak to each other?
Yeah. In the
and-
Sandman comic books.
Yeah, I mean, unless I'm totally misremembering, yeah, they do interact with each other.
Well, that's going to lead me down this other line of questions.
There's one.
What's that, Stephanie?
There's
Does he need to speak to his lawyer first?
He may.
there's one right above your head.
Now, Doug is a big fan of the comic book Sandman. In the comic book Sandman, Morpheus is the main character. He talks to Lucifer. Now, I've noticed something. You got the name Doug. If you notice, the name Doug starts with the letter D. So does Demon. I'm just saying, there's probably a connection right here.
Yeah, that's
Let
the
us know
much
in
bigger.
the chat, is there a connection to Doug's first letter of his name and the word demon? We got to know this.
That's the bigger news you're breaking.
All right. Here's the last question. That
Good.
little troll that I saw when I was walking through the woods wanted me to ask, how long have you been working as Neil Gaiman's publicist?
Probably since I read the first issue. I've been singing his praises. So yeah, Dave can vouch for your
figured it out
demon
to
theory.
you, Dave.
So.
Nice brother.
Yeah.
But all right, Doug, thanks for being a good sport. And chat, let us know the answers. Is
I
it
thought
Doug
you were
that comes
throwing
to the
me-
mirror?
Sorry, Matt. I was gonna say I thought you were throwing me a trick question there with the does Morpheus speak to Lucifer? I'm like, yeah, but am I misremembering something? Does he go through an intermediary? I don't know. So
Doug,
I was just making
Doug,
sure that
I
you were being
caution you
honest.
to take the fifth and any questions.
Yeah,
that
there
Matt
you go.
provides
yeah, I'm
you.
gonna have my lawyer start interceding on my behalf before I answer any more of Matt's questions.
All right, I'm gonna let the great Climbing Comics answer or ask the next questions. Thanks again, Doug.
Oh, no worries, no worries. But I just wanted to check with you, Joe. Did you want to?
Well, we can have.
What about Wayne? Now, Wayne.
Yeah.
Does
I
Wayne
really have I have no questions
wait,
because, to be honest, I've seen 1.5 episodes. It doesn't appeal to me. It's not something I'm going to continue to watch. I've never read the comics, so it's just not my cup of tea. So I'm just content to listen and enjoy what you guys are talking about and how much you enjoyed the show. But it's really, I'd rather watch She-Hulk Attorney at Law, to be honest. That's more my speed. So yeah, so I've got no questions. I'm good.
No, that's great. I was going to ask you if like our conversation inspired you or anything, and I think
I watched the first episode. I appreciated the visuals. I appreciated how well crafted it was. I like Charles Dance, so anything with Charles Dance is always a good show for me. Watched halfway through the second episode, and I was kind of didn't really grab me, and I kind of stopped at the point he was talking to the Fates, I think it was, and I'm like, okay, it's really not for me. It's not. I'm not the audience for this. So I might try if I run out of absolutely everything else to watch, but I'm probably not going to. And that's partly because one of the things that was talked about before, which is lighthearted fare versus serious fare. It's like one of the things I never watched Game of Thrones. It's just a little too dark for me. I stopped watching The Walking Dead around the time Negan showed up. I'm like, I can't take it. It's just too dark for me. And watching this, it's like, I can tell it's going to be too dark for me. And maybe I'm a sensitive soul, but halfway through the second episode, I don't want to spoil anything, but there's a particular character that is not human that at that point, unless something changes, their fate is dealt with to help Morpheus. And I like, it made me a little sad. And I'm like, no, I don't want to watch this. So that's just me. That's just me. So, and I've never read the comic, and it's not a book that's ever appealed to me. So, yeah,
I was
fair.
going to ask that about your interaction
with
with
downer. We just lost 25 people. They're
all like, Wade's right. This is just we don't want to watch this. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to bring anyone down. I'm just being honest.
I'm just joking with you. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, I'm just being honest about my feelings. It's just not my cup of tea. Not my cup of tea. So.
That's fair.
It would be kind of boring if we all were saying the exact same thing,
right.
thought the same thing. Like I think.
Don't get me wrong. I mean, I appreciate the visuals. I appreciate how well it's produced, and I can see like the incredible amount of effort that went into its production. Morpheus is a little too emo for my taste, and it's just. I don't know. Can't put my finger on it. It's just really not for me.
But I think season 2 is going to be Morpheus versus She-Hulk. At that point, I think you'll probably tune in.
Then I'd watch it.
Yeah, that crossover.
What if I told you on episode 7 there's a squirrel?
I'll skip to episode 7, but I'll have no context for the squirrel. Yeah.
Right, do you have any final questions on this for Doug?
No, Doug, I'm the one that reached out to Doug. I am so grateful. I have been excited and messaging Doug a lot, like how I'm loving it. So thanks for putting up with me, Doug.
I never answered your Sam Keith question, and I'll just say that I've not been. I'm not knocking Sam Keith's art. He hasn't been an artist whose career I've really followed. I feel like all of the artwork on Sandman was done by really smart storytellers who are artists. Now, their style isn't always for everybody. If you were kind of more into classic Neil Adams, kind of George Perez stuff, which I was when I was younger, it probably wouldn't have been my cup of tea. Reading it in my 40s instead, I could really appreciate the brilliant storytelling throughout the series. So I believe Sam Keith was an artist on issue number 1. So that's pretty incredible to have on your resume.
Well, you know something. I mean, to each is kind of his own. But one thing that I think, and I'm glad that Wayne gave it a shot, because some people don't even give it a shot. I mean, I go back years and years ago where someone had invited me to go see an opera at the Metropolitan Opera. And I'm saying, come on, you got to be kidding me. I'm not going to see any opera. But I went because it was a good looking girl, you know, so you have to do it. So I went and I loved it. I loved it. I ended up getting a subscription for a few years to the New York City Opera Company. I brought my mother there to see the opera, an Italian opera. She came to see that. And so for years, I haven't done it now in a number of years, but for years, because my wife doesn't like it. So that was the end of that. But for years, I went to the opera, and it was just something I never imagined in my life that I was going to do. So, but I gave it a shot, and it worked for me. But you give it a shot, it works or it doesn't work. And I think that's all you can do. I think that makes a lot of sense. Okay, guys. So I think, as usual, the comic book crowd does not resolve anything. But we had fun doing that. So now we did want to talk a little bit about isolation with you. So we all have my triple sign over here, you know. What's this? Is this like the one that's written like this has silver and gold intertwined? Is that what it is? I forget, because it costs a lot of money. That's all I remember. So we have isolation, which Doug, you've written. And you know, when I grew up, I wanted to be a writer, but my uncle explained to my parents that I would starve if I was a writer. So I've done some writing on the side, and actually I've written some things that are loosely based on some family things that I know, just basically for myself. Other than I guess the podcast that I put together, which I have another 20 I want to do. I just haven't got around to doing them. That was for my family as well. But there are stories that are in there. But, you know, you did something that to me, I always wished that I could have done, or that I even had an idea of what was going on there. Because of where you lived, you ended up going to some artist school, right? You want to tell us a little bit about that and how that got you into what you had been doing?
Sure. I was very lucky and grew up about 5 minutes away from the Joe Kubert School of Comic and Cartoon Art. And I did not, and I have to make sure my resume is clear on this, I did not go to the 3-year intensive degree program that the artists who work on the comic went to. But I did take Saturday classes there. And and it certainly got a love of creating comics kind of going for me at a young age. And the funny thing is, during the pandemic, during the lockdown portion, I took an online class that Dan DiDio taught on pitching. And I did it to develop a pitch for isolation. So it not only was helpful to me in, you know, creating a love of comics and creating comics, but it also helped me be very prepared for when I was very fortunate to have the opportunity to pitch isolation to Regie.
And so where did this idea for isolation germinate? I mean, did it come from like something that someone told you, from something that happened, you know, in a family, from some other work of art that you may have seen that kind of sparked some idea in your head?
A lot of different things over time, whether personal experiences, moving from the Northeast and living down South during my college years, to a friend of mine who is an inspiration for a character who you won't see for a while. A lot of different things kind of I played around with for a long time to put together the story of isolation. But ultimately, the funny thing is, because I mentioned this on Reggie's show, and I was told like never say this again, but it is true. After watching the series Lost, like other viewers who watched it, I was very intrigued at the beginning by the idea of a mystery series, but I became very disillusioned and frustrated by the fact that it seemed like they really had no clue where they were going. And I did kind of have this internal kind of like, well, I should try and see if I can come up with like a mystery, but actually connect all the dots and know where it's going and all of that. So that was a little bit of an inspiration, but somebody, and I don't know who to attribute this to, so I apologize, but when I was younger and I first started writing, I noticed that I would tend to want to try and write something that was like something that I read that I liked. And I learned that if you do that, whether you mean to or not, your work ends up being more derivative than you mean for it to be. And somewhere along the way, I heard somebody say, if you have an idea and it is something that you would want to read or watch and you've never seen it before, that's the idea that you should pursue. And when I was taking these different life experiences or history that I was reading about, I mentioned in an interview I read some nonfiction true crime things. One book, the man from the train, kind of inspired an element of it. I started taking all these different pieces and putting them together in these multiple time periods. And I felt like it could make a really unique, interesting story that I would want to watch or read. And I hadn't seen something done that way before. And that's when I kind of felt like, okay, these notes that I'm throwing down in my notebook, when I have the time, I really need to work and figure that out and connect the dots, because I think that fits the bill of something interesting that I would want to watch or read that I haven't read before.
So when you first started writing this, I think I read this somewhere in one of the interviews you've given on this. You were thinking about a novel, I believe. Is that correct?
It got to that point.
It got to that point.
When I originally had the idea, I thought it would make a really cool, like television streaming type of series. And because of that, I felt a graphic novel comic format would be wonderful to write in, because I have zero knowledge of television, film, or connections. But because of my cartooning background, I do have some knowledge of that industry. So my first thought, and when I first started playing around with it, I kind of envisioned it as a comic book series. I realized while I was doing it that was severely limiting. Even though I was in that field and had connections, I know how hard it is to get something like this greenlit. And there's probably like, 10 to 20 publishers on the planet who can do that, or who could at that time. And I realized that there are a lot more traditional publishers. So while I envisioned it as a comic series, I felt it made a lot more sense to write Isolation as a series of 3 novels, because I felt I had a better just odds. The odds were more in my favor to see a series of novels published than a comic book series published.
So when did you decide to approach Regie, I guess, after you saw the Dan DiDio online course. I mean, was it your idea to approach Reggie, just to approach someone with this idea for some 30 some odd issues of a comic book called Isolation?
It really was it was somewhat luck. I think luck plays a huge part in all success stories, and I feel like people like to talk about their successes and their hard work, which is absolutely true. But there also have to be some nice breaks that come your way. And for me, I feel where I got lucky was during the original lockdown when I started watching content. I would have never met Reggie otherwise. I don't believe. And that was lucky. And from getting to know Reggie, writing the blog for him, that led to the book, and the quality and interest and success of the book, I think, led me to a place where I knew the stars were aligned well, that a pitch would be very well received by Reggie. I think he saw the success, knew there was an opportunity to expand in publishing, loved original comic book content. So I felt like I had a unique opportunity to pitch Reggie Isolation in a way that I probably couldn't any other comic publisher, and that includes ones that I know. Because in many ways, Isolation is the type of a series that would be less likely to be greenlit, but because of the nature of comics. Most comics, they want an idea and like, well, we'll give you a couple issues, see where it goes, and if it has legs, continue it. If not, wrap it up. And Isolation wasn't that series. And when I pitched it to Reggie, I was very upfront, and I said, look, we don't know if we'll get to complete this. That's going to depend on the response of the audience over time. But I really think it's of a quality and has an opportunity to fit a unique place in the market. And I also understand going into this that you might have to pull the plug on this at some point if the dollars are not making sense. And Reggie was still very receptive in spite of those risks.
Okay, I have one more question. I know as we go forward, I know you don't want to spill the beans on the story so much for people who haven't read it yet, although we might get into some of the stuff. But one of the things is, so you've gotten this effectively like 3 novels or whatever it happens to be. Now you're going to convert it into something that's going to be able to produce a comic book and have an artist look at. I'm going to guess that you didn't use the Marvel way on this thing, but that you gave, specific, since you already had it all written out, essentially converted into like specific panels and what needed to be there. Am I correct on that?
Yeah, that's correct. I actually, I have a draft written of one of the 3 novels. The second and the third have detailed outlines, so everything is mapped out. But I was fortunate while I was revising the novel is when I pitched it to Reggie, and from there I have taken each chapter of that novel and converted it to a script format.
Okay, and so how did that, when you started to work with Dahlia, how did that work out? I mean, I'm just kind of interested. I've read a lot about Lee and Kirby and these people and how he gave the idea. They would draw stuff out, leave thought balloons or whatever there, and he would fill in, the stuff like that. This is different. This is there saying, first splash panel, half page, whatever. This person walking into the library. Whatever. I mean, you're going to be doing something like that. So how does an artist take that? And how is the artist able, in your experience now, to take that and make that basically her own?
I think there's a really tricky balance between communicating in the script what you feel needs to be on the page, and that includes a description of the panels and all of the dialogue and captions, because you're not trying to fit in words after the drawing. You want your artist to know, hey, this person's going to be talking a lot in this panel, so there needs to be room for that dialogue. So all of that is written out. This is not a Marvel way script. It's an actual detailed comic script with all of that done. But I think there's two things. I think that you have to trust the artist once you say, hey, this needs 4 panels, and here's what needs to happen in those 4 panels. But with rare exceptions, that's where I leave it. I want to trust her artistic vision to interpret what that will look like on a page.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I'm just trying to get to the end of my stuff. I'm going to get there. So, I mean, did you have a situation where she presented you with a sketch and you said, well, I think maybe it should be a little bit different, some changes there, and here's why?
Yeah, that's part of the process. So one, I mean, how we work, I am open to feedback, and there have been times where she's come back and said, hey, I'd like to combine these 2 panels because I think it'll help the page work better. Right. Every time in the first 2 issues she's done that, I've said, yep, you're right. That's a good call. We're going to go with that. She does a rough layout. Those come to me, and 90% of the times I say, these are amazing. Great job. Continue on. The other 10%, it's usually questions about, is there enough room for this dialogue? Or I think this might work better in this way, and here's why. But that's the exception, not the rule. I'm trying not to micromanage my artist, and I understand that she has a lot more experience and training in the visual artistic layout of a page than I do. And we do think differently. I'm thinking as a writer, and what needs to be communicated, and she's thinking what will graphically look interesting, and we've got to make those 2 things work.
Well, that's a good combination. Okay, my last question is: did you know her beforehand? If so, is that why, or how did you end up with Dahlia as your artist on these issues?
Yeah, when Regie greenlit the project, one of the things we talked about was how we would select an artist, and because of my other background, I do know artists, and there were 2 artists that I had originally thought of and asked Regie if I could bring to his attention. One was Delia, who I knew through the Kubert School. She worked like 2 days a week at Dewey's, the comic shop that's attached to it. And when I was in there, I'd met her through the school, but she was working on her first book at that time. And it happened to be a period piece book that had tremendously detailed, costumes and buildings and all the things that would be important for a story like Isolation. So she was one of the 2 artists I had in mind. The other is a comic book artist who's also a Kubert School graduate, but I know through the National Cartoonist Society. And just as, as luck would have it, the day I was going to reach out to that artist, he posted on his Instagram feed a Publisher Weekly article that he just had a 250-page graphic novel greenlit that he was starting to work on. So I went back to Regie and said, how about I bring you 1 instead of 2, and let's go from there.
Well, thanks. All this stuff just interests me, and so hopefully interests some of the people watching as well, like some of the background stuff and how this works. Because I've taken some of at the New York Comic Con, the Kubert School usually does a presentation, and I've gone to a couple of them, with artists and writers there, and what they have to say. But speaking to someone who's going through the process, I think to me just helps to fill in some of the blanks of what I've seen there. So I think that's it for me. Sorry if I dominated the conversation, but I'll open up to anybody else who wants to ask some questions. And I remember Doug wants to say something about some places he's going to be later on. Squirrel Madness.
Actually, the question I had prepared was about how did you gather the artistic team, but Joe's already covered it, so I don't have any questions.
All right.
So, Steve.
I have a question or two.
Oh, it's Steve.
Okay, Matt.
Matt, do you want to make a sign that says Matt Woods and you can go next?
Matt, Steve. Three strokes.
I'll let you go, Steve.
Evens, odds.
All right. Well, mine falls right in line with that. I think because Doug, you're a cartoonist, right? And you've got the ideas and you've done the art and you've executed. That Joe, he did jump all over my questions, but so I was curious about did you create storyboards and send it over to the artist team? And how much of the story, I feel like I'm kind of curious from the artist perspective, and I know you might have a hard time answering this, but how much of the story do they get? Do they get the full deep into the story so that they can create the first art on the first issue? Does that make sense to have some context?
Yeah, it does. And the answer is not much. Delia and I have met several times because of the character design element to the story. And I have talked through certain character elements and twists, so she understands kind of not only where a character is starting, but where they're going later in the series. So Delia knows some, she hasn't read the novel and she doesn't know everything that happens throughout, but she pretty much knows some very important, who lives, who doesn't, who do you think is bad, who might not be bad, who do you think is good, who might not be, all of that kind of stuff. Delia has a better understanding of that. And then you asked another question before that and I forgot it.
Well, just about this, just basic storyboards. Did you draft
up
storyboards? And
no, there are only two panels that I feel like I micromanaged, and Delia and I joke about it. One was not to give away for story for anybody who hasn't read issue number 1, but there's a gentleman who has an axe in the story, and the original layout had that gentleman wearing Ked-like sneakers, and I just didn't feel that fit the vibe of 1949 dude with an axe. So I did ask for those to be made into leather work shoes, and to the artist's credit, they had researched, and those shoes, new to me, were made in the 1920s, so they were period accurate. But I didn't feel it fit the vibe that I wanted. And then the second was the last page, which I'm not going to talk about for those who haven't read it, but if you've read it, that's an important page. And we kind of went back and forth a couple of times on the on kind of the reveal image on the final page. So,
do you have anything, man? A big congratulations from the Blasters.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Matt Woods has become the director of the
I have
show.
one thing. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, Matt Woods just gave it over to Climbing Comics. Do you want to?
No. I'm passing it back to Madam. I'm passing it back to
Well,
Madam.
thank you, Doug. Have you ever imagined the isolation being on screen?
Yes. When I first, I think in part because when I first started like seriously jotting down notes and trying to figure things out, I was ticked off at Lost. In my head, it played kind of as a show. And one of the reasons that I, not just because I worked in the field, but because I felt it was a visually interesting story. I think that's also why I could see it translating well to a streaming show. I just think it would work well in that medium. So,
Good question.
I think you're up, Alan.
I'm trying to answer these with the signs and the.
I guess it's me. So I have a quick two-parter, right? So I kind of want to pick your mind about, like, I know you've written the 3 novels, and it sounds like you have the drafts for 2 and 3. Do you know exactly how this ends, or is this still morphing with novel 2, novel 3 as to like how it would end? And secondly, since you mentioned Lost, I know they like to put like little Easter eggs here and there, and I always like to like look at specific pictures, like why is this here, why is that there? Are you the type to also like to use Easter eggs in generally?
That is a fantastic question, both of them.
Thanks.
So to answer your first one, yes, I know exactly how this is going to end and do not envision that changing. Could there be minor threads or details along the way that I, chicken out of because someone really likes a character and I decide, well, maybe they'll live instead of not, there might be minor things like that along the way. But as far as the story of isolation and how this thing ends, it is done in the books, set in stone, not going to change.
God has spoken.
Yeah, exactly. Now that's really important to your second question about Easter eggs. So structurally, and this is something that depending on if we have enough time, I'll get into. The structure of isolation from how I originally envisioned it to what I ended up writing changed for some very specific reasons. And issue number 1 is structurally a bit different than the majority, not all, but the majority of the issues of isolation that you'll see. Issue number 1 has, I'm breaking news here. Issue number 1 has scenes from all different 4 timelines. When I originally envisioned the story, it was with the intent of telling all 4 of these time period stories simultaneously. And as I got into the process of outlining it, that changed because it had to. There would have been too much beginning at the beginning, too much middle in the middle, too much end at the end. And there would have been way too many characters. I'm not George R.R. Martin. I don't want to try and have 100+ named characters that everybody has to keep track of. With that said, there are absolutely elements to all 4 time periods that interconnect and are important. And I originally envisioned telling them all together because at points I could connect dots. So what I ended up doing was I started out with issue number 1 with those kind of vignettes that I felt would introduce all of the important elements to establish the world that you were going to read. But most of the next issues will be primarily, like the first story arc, mostly 1869 with the 1990 elements as a smaller piece throughout almost every issue. As that comes to a close, it'll go back to having all 4 of those time periods and those stories that were introduced in issue number 1 that will come together again. But it was really important for me to know where all of this was going to do issue 1, because I promise you, if we get to do all 32 to 36 issues of this, when you get to the end, you will go back to issue number 1 and you will be shocked how many Easter eggs and little things that seem like they're not connected or not necessarily important. They're just something visually interesting in a panel, are exceedingly important to the story of Isolation.
Dang it, Doug. You got to do all 33 to 36
I
issues
know.
now. After I hear that, I'm saying to myself, come on.
If everybody keeps buying it, I think we'll get to keep making it.
Yes.
So Isolation was born in your disappointment of loss.
Partially. Yeah. I got annoyed. I'm like, come on. Like,
Are we gonna
I
are
love-
we gonna go to Canada in Isolation? Are we gonna go to Canada?
not okay. Here's more breaking news for you. It is not part of these 3 books. The 3 books tell a complete story. Like many books, it kind of builds out a bigger world, and there are opportunities that if they do well enough, maybe there will be other stories told in that world, and those might involve different locations. I'll say that, but it's Louisiana, Isolation, Louisiana, and London. Spoiler for those who haven't read issue number 1.
Do you have any of the original art?
I do.
Good.
I bought I bought 3 as gifts. I bought Pam her favorite page, Caden his, and Dave his as well. And I bought a few of my favorite pages that Regie didn't buy because we had like a draft buying back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
But I do have the cover A original artwork.
Ooh.
Wow.
Nice.
Thanks to Regie. Regie
That's great.
made sure I got that. So
I have 2 things. One, I want to show my OA, but I don't want to spoil it for anyone, even though I have posted on Instagram. Can I show it?
Sure.
Yeah.
Ooh.
oh, nice.
I got.
Hold on.
This doesn't work
I
anymore.
got a pretty hardcore pre-code horror style
That's
page,
beautiful.
which I won't, obviously provide any context for those who haven't read it, but that's pretty hardcore. I'm very pleased with it.
Page.
Adelia's work is fantastic, and
in the
I
Sandman.
loved her work, and so happy to get a piece of OA from issue 1. The other thing is, you're talking about spin-offs, and I want to tell you, just for the record, I'd like to have a spin-off story about the French strongman who's sitting in the bar with his little striped shirt and his mustache. I still want a spin-off story just about that dude, because I saw him in the picture, and I'm like, I want to know more about that guy. He's just so awesome with his striped shirt and his mustache.
Yeah.
So this if we get to the second book, which is the 19 19 story arc, you'll get a lot more involving members of that circus.
Awesome.
They're an important part of it. So
Good. That strongman really interests me. I don't know why.
I think it's so cool. Like from the sidelines in the Gibbon Gang, multiple members of the Gibbon Gang have purchased their first pages of original comic book art through this project.
Mhm.
And we're asking like behind the scenes questions about storyboards and picking your. I just think it's like we're along for the ride. The gang is with this project, and it's really opening ourselves up to neat parts of how a comic book is made, the thought process, the art. And for me, I just got so much joy when there were members saying, this is my first piece of original comic book art. I really was getting excited about that.
Yeah, that's my first.
To me, it's fantastic, because if this community didn't form and exist, this comic wouldn't, or it wouldn't now. The support that the Gibbon Gang, that the community that's kind of developed around Regie, that is interested in supporting content that he's involved with, is really the thing that has made Swoldier Publishing possible, which is the thing that has made Isolation possible. So for me, it's a really fun element that I have friends, and I mean that genuinely. Like I've met so many, I've sat down and had dinner with many of you, you know, and Steve and Stephanie, and we'll get there because you live across the country. But you know, I expect that any of us who haven't yet, we'll make sure we remedy that at GarageCon in November. But I'm really thankful. I feel very lucky that this has happened in the way that it has, that we have a community that's so supportive in helping it come to be. And for me, it's fun that I have friends that are interested in this, that like not only want to read it, which is great, but like want to talk about it and learn some of the behind the scenes stuff. And that's awesome. Like, I love that.
That's great. Joe, what are you up to up there?
I'm getting rid of some of this crap that's come on here. I was going to say something. Well, I don't know if anybody else has any other stuff to say, but I mean, you're kind of, Reggie always says he's living his dream and stuff like that. I know from my standpoint, a lot of comic guys, I mean, to me, this is just fantastic that you're able to do that, you know, and, you know, I have all my little doodles in my book and my things that I write down there, but never got to anything like what you've done. And I just think it's just terrific. And I congratulate you, I think. And I think like your friendship with Reggie, obviously you talked about luck, but to me, you know, luck has a big part in success, but you have to put yourself in the position to be able to get that luck. You know, you have to work hard and do things to show people that you are worth them investing time and I guess money even, you know, in you. And I think you've done that. And I think I congratulate you on that. And I'm jealous as hell. No, and I think it's really fantastic. Really fantastic. So we've gone a bit over the hour. I think a little bit over the hour. So I don't know, do we have any final questions about Isolation? Yes, Matt?
All right. Now, this has been such a great show, all right? But Doug, I have more comments than I do actual questions, okay? Now, reading Isolation. Now, it had a great noir feel, which is unique, okay? If you're a spandex superhero-loving comic book fan, you don't realize that there are multiple genres in comic books. There's horror, there's romance, there's country, or not country western, but, you know, western comics. There are mysteries. There are, well, I said horror, but there's so many different genres that it's pretty much just like reading any book. And I don't know, it was an exciting story, but honestly, and I'm not just, saying something nice because I know you, it was one of the most exciting first issues of a comic book series that I've read in a long time. Like, I'm going to be honest with you, whenever I read it, I had to go back and read it, because who's ever read a story and you just flip through the pages too quick because you were trying to get to the next part, and then you're like, wait, I need to go back and read that a little slower. It was such a page turner, so enjoying. And I've talked to you, like DMs and on Instagram and stuff. I know that there is a plan in place, but you can honestly read this and it's set up. Okay, you start out, and I'm not going to give out the comic book, but you start out in one scene, and then boom, you're in another scene. And I don't think I'm breaking any news here, but that other scene might be in a different year, in a different, just setting. And I cannot wait for issue number 2, 3, 4, skip a few, get to 36, and read the whole series. And the art on it, I'm telling you, Delia Gunderson, she's going to be a name that we will hear about going forward. Her art is legit. And the way she does the shading, and I'm not an artist. We have 2 incredible artists right here who I ended up putting their name, and I put the arrow backwards, but I don't know. I think it's kind of fun that it's backwards. But anyhow, they know more about this than I do. But just Delia's way of presenting the scenes, absolutely amazing. And it brings you in. And just like Squirrel Madness said, the French guy sitting there, like, he's so well drawn. You want to know his backstory, and there's like faces to all these people, and there's like a story with all of these characters that are in this. And I'm so looking forward to seeing how this develops going forward. So thanks for keeping this workout, and looking forward to it.
Well, I'll say one thing, kind of finish it up. What I told Doug before the show started was that issue number 1 should have been longer. And the reason I said that was when I got to the end, they said, there's no more, I wanted more, and so, maybe it'll be put together in a trade or something like that. And I think from a standpoint down the road, after we get all 33 to 36 issues, being able to have them there so you can read through it will just make it a better experience for everybody. So Doug, I just want to thank you for spending the time with us. You always, bring a lot to the table, whether you're on Reggie's show, when you're on this show as well. And so I think you're going to be somewhere with Delia soon. You want to tell people about that?
Yeah, if anybody's in the New Jersey area, I mentioned Dewey's Comic City at the Joe Kubert School in Dover on Saturday, September 10th from noon to 3, and depending on who's there, we're allowed to stay a little later if we need to. Delia and I will be there to sign copies of Isolation. If anybody bought them in advance, you're welcome to bring them. We'll sign them. There will be a limited number available at Dewey's for purchase. So if anybody hasn't picked them up, or you decide you're tired of waiting for the mail in Canada and you want to come on down to Dover, New Jersey, they're there. So we'll have them. So yeah, September 10th. And I will say, for anybody who's interested in making a day of it, Zapcon, which Zap is one of the best probably comic shops in the country. It's incredible. They're having a con that day, and I think it goes from like 10 a.m. to say 5 in the afternoon. But what I'm really encouraging people is, hey, if you live like an hour and a half away and it's going to be a hike, come down in the morning, go to Zapcon, do some digging for a couple of hours. And Dewey's is about a 20 to 25 minute drive. So it's really not that far. Pop on over in the afternoon. So that's my pitch.
Well, I just wrote that down. We'll see I don't know what's going on the 10th yet, but I'll take a look at that and see. It's great.
Well, Doug, thanks for coming on. I am looking forward to being the most handsome person on the panel next month. Once you're not here anymore. So no, it was so much fun.
Who the heck voted for that?
This
You get one vote on all of the drawings, so now you're claiming a victory on something else where there's no votes. I don't get that. Whatever.
in the comments section. No, I'm kidding.
Steve.
It's been amazing, Doug. Thanks for coming on. It means the world to us. We can't wait to hang out at GarageCon. You know, yeah.
I'll
Ooh,
talk
that
your
sounds
ears
like
off
an
much
excellent
longer
story.
on Sandman.
I can't wait. I can't wait.
Yeah, I might be on a cruise with my wife during that time, I think. So I'm not sure I'm going to be able to make it, but hopefully the cruise ends early enough that I can get down there.
Hey, I'm already planning the Friday night dinner for anybody who
You
can
Okay,
come out. We're doing that. It's going to be a tradition.
that's great.
We're
Nice.
down.
All right, Doug, thanks a lot again. And thanks for everybody that was in the chat that showed up to watch Doug. This might have been like our biggest showing yet. I know why. We had one of the premier comic book writers in the world here tonight. So, Doug, thanks again. And we'll see you all next month. Another great topic or topics, hopefully. And if you have a topic you want us to discuss, just send it over to us. And you could send it to any one of us on Instagram. And I have Doug's Instagram in the description below. So make sure you follow him on Instagram so you get to learn a little bit more about isolation and other things that are coming up. All right, guys, take care. Everybody, see you next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
All right.